Hello, this is the third video in my little three-part series where I show you the process I went through to add this knitted ribbed collar to my crochet granny square sweater. So there are two other videos before this. One shows you the first step of the process where I knitted the first version of the collar, which I wasn't very happy with. And the second video shows you how I've added, rounded off the edges of this sort of rectangular neck opening. And then this video, I'm going to show you how to cast on and knit this ribbed collar. So I have actually used the same yarn that I've used for the sweater. I've held it double to match the thickness of the crochet, and I've used the same size knitting needle as I used crochet hook. So I used a 3mm crochet hook and a 3mm knitting needle. So I've got my two lots of the 4-ply that I'm going to hold double, and I've got 3mm knitting needles. Obviously your size of needle will vary depending on your gauge, and this is just what I'm using to match my gauge and the yarn. So I'm using circular needles. So remember, I'm using this 4-ply held double because my first prototype ribbed neck didn't look, the fabric didn't match, the thickness didn't match the crochet. It's a bit too fine. So here we are. All I'm doing is I'm literally got my two strands, and I'm going to hold them, I'm going to knit them together at the same time. So I'm going to be picking up the stitches from this single crochet border that I added, and I always like to start at a shoulder seam. I'm actually going to use my crochet hook to help me cast on the stitches. So here, to start off, I'm starting right on the shoulder, middle of the shoulder. I'm holding tail end of the yarn to the back of the work. I'm pulling up a loop, and then I am putting it on my knitting needle, and I'm just going to carry on doing that all the way along. So I'm going to get my hook, I'm going to go through both loops of that single crochet border that I did. I'm going to pull up a loop, and I'm going to pop it onto my knitting needle. So I'm going to go ahead and carry on doing that, and I will meet you back when I have finished. So almost done. Last couple of stitches to pick up. Okay, and I'm actually going to get a little stitch marker here and just pop that on my needle so that I know where the end of the round, start of the round is. So I'm doing a 1x1 rib, so I'm going to knit 1 purl 1, knit 1 purl 1, and I don't actually know if I've got an even number of if I've cast on an even number of stitches. So what I'm going to do is if I get back to this end and I'm got one stitch too many, I'm just going to, or 1 2 few, I'm just going to knit 2, probably just going to knit 2 together, but we'll see. I'm just going to hope that I've got the right number. So this first one's a little bit loose because it's the end I started, but I can tie that in later. So I'm basically just going to knit. I'm actually going to nip into the way I've picked these up, I'm going to be knitting and purling into the back loop here actually. Next round I won't need to do that, but it's just how I picked them up with the crochet hook. So I'm just going to knit and purl with my little bell, like a cat collar. People can hear me coming when I'm knitting. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and carry on knitting in 1 by 1 rib until I get back to the start, and then it's going to be potluck 50-50 really as to whether I have got an even or an odd number of stitches, but I'm not too worried, so I'm just going to do knit 2 together or purl 2 together, whatever it happens to. Purl 2 together probably. Okay, so I'll see you in a minute. I'm coming back to my bell, and so I have got an odd number of stitches, so because I started with a knit I want to end with a purl, so I'm through the back. Like, I need to rearrange these so that I can knit both of them, purl 2 together. So just rearrange those stitches so that they're the right way around on the hook, and then I've purled the 2 together to get rid of that extra stitch. So hopefully that won't be too visible, and then I'm going to do round 2. I'm going to do that in the same way, just making sure that my knits are stacked on my knits and my purls are stacked on my purls. So this is also good to keep notes, because I've ripped out the other ribbing that I did, but I made a note of how many rounds I did, and actually because I've taken out some of the crochet, additional crochet rows that I put, I think I'm going to go for about 12 rounds of this ribbing and see what it looks like. So I'll probably come back to you when I've finished knitting my 12 rounds. So I'm coming up to the end of the last round of 1 by 1 ribbed knit, and I'm now ready to cast off. So I'm not going to use any special stretchy bind off here because I definitely don't want any ruffling or anything. However, I am going to cast off in stitch pattern. I'm going to knit 1, purl 1 and then cast off. So here I've actually, the first stitch of that round I only caught 1 strand, so let's just fix that first of all. Okay, so to cast off, you probably already know how to do this, but I'm going to show you just in case you are unfamiliar. So I'm going to knit the first stitch, I'm going to purl the second stitch, so I'm always stacking the same stitches on top of each other, and then that first knit stitch that I knitted, I'm just picking that up from the front with the left hand needle, and I'm passing it over that stitch that I purled. Next stitch I'm going to knit, and I'm going to pass the stitch that I purled over the top of that knitted stitch. Next stitch is purl, pass the knitted stitch over. Next stitch is knit, pass the purled stitch over. Next stitch is purl, pass, I've lost a strand. So that's, you just got to be a little bit careful here with these yarn held double, because when you're casting off you just got to take a little bit of extra care. But other than that, it's pretty straightforward. So just do a couple more and then we'll have a quick look at what it looks like. So you just got to remember to keep knitting and purling on top of the knits and purls, just to keep everything in pattern. So I'm just going to pass that on over there a minute while we have a quick look. So that's what the cast off edge is going to look like, and I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to go ahead and carry on doing that, and I'll meet you back at when I've finished casting off all the stitches. So I'm coming up to the last few stitches here for casting off. Cast off the last stitch. Get my scissors and cut, leaving long enough tail for sewing in. And then I'm actually just going to remove the needle out of that last stitch, and then I'm going to pull the live loop until the ends pop out. Now I'm going to do like a sewn bind off here. So thread my tail ends. I'm going to skip a stitch because I'm making a mock stitch. I'm going into the second cast off stitch there. They look very much like crochet stitches anyway, so if you're not a seasoned knitter, you always get a bit of a tight bit there, a baggy bit there, but it'll be on the inside. So I've gone through that second stitch and I've made a front loop here. Then I'm going to go this last stitch that I made, I'm going to go down through the middle of that and through to the back of the work. I'm just going to pull that tight until it kind of matches the other stitches, and then I've got this slightly weird baggy thing here, so I'm actually going to stitch around that to sort of pull it down a bit. And then what I like to do is just sort of weave, if you can see this sort of left loop of this, it's actually a purl stitch because this is the back of the purl stitch. I like to kind of weave down into there like that, keep going all the way, and then I'm probably going to sew that into that single crochet row into the back legs. Being careful it's matching gauge. Catch a leg of that single crochet, next single crochet, and come back the other way for a little bit before pulling everything tight. So before I cut that off, I'm just going to double check that I'm actually happy with my ribbed collar. So it will actually be this way up. So actually that's pretty good, considering I didn't bother swatching or anything and it was just a bit of an experiment. I'm actually quite happy with that. We have got a little bit of ruffling going on, but I think actually once it's being worn, I think, and after a bit of washing and blocking, I think when that's actually on, I think that's going to look pretty good actually. So I think overall quite chuffed with that.